from my point of view, Carnivore has given that to me. It is just such a release. It's just wonderful. It's amazing, amazing.
Peter, how did you find Carnivore?
Yeah, just before I start, Dave, I'd just like to say that I've watched a lot of your videos, and it's just absolutely amazing to me the results that people have achieved, and it's so gratifying and satisfying, and the courage that people have shown. And when I look at my case, I think my case is nothing to the ailments and the maladies that some people have faced. So I'm a very, very mild case, if you like. But maybe it's a wake up call to some people, because in my case, I've never had high blood pressure. I've never been on any meds. My pulse rate has always been less than 65 in rest. I think, or I thought, I was pretty healthy. Um, so let's just get into the story. Going back to March 2024, my wife and I went out for dinner one night in Sydney. It was kind of an off the cuff, and close by our place, we've got a shopping centre with these very nice restaurants, about 5 in a row, all different varieties. We chose the Mexican and had an absolutely lovely meal. We didn't know what was going on the menu, so we just chose the set menu for two, and had a lovely meal, bottle of wine, and that night I just did not sleep. My stomach was churning. I mean, it was just terrible. So next day came back to the farm, and at that time I was making my own bread on the farm, and I was using the bread mix from the supermarket, and was using the whole grain bread mix rather than the white bread mix. Thinking that was the healthy option. I've since learned otherwise. Um, and every time I had bread, I would get this heartburn, reflux, acid in my chest. And like everything, it goes away, and then so you have some more bread, and it comes again, and it goes away and comes again. And at that time in March, we still had a leftover Christmas cake, one of those Christmas cakes that is in a sealed cellophane wrap, and it had been there for a few months, and I thought, I'll eat that. And I ate this cake and just completely went off. I mean, the pain in my chest was just amazing. It was um, uh, terrible. But just like previous things, the next day, the next bit of cake, I ate it again and had the same again. And I thought, no, this is not good. And I had heard of the Atkins diet. I was sitting right here at my computer where I'm sitting now, and kind of just by chance, I thought I'll look up the Atkins diet, and did so. And I think one of the first videos that came up, the first people that came up, was Dr. Anthony Chaffee. And I was listening to him, and I'd heard about the Atkins diet many years ago, and I was thinking, gee, if you only ate meat and fat, you'd have fat coming out your pores, your eyes would be swelling, you'd have a ruddy complexion. And I looked at Dr. Chaffee and I thought, look how well this guy looks. And at that time, he'd said he'd been on for 6 years, and he'd done it before in his life. And he was a rugby player and all of that. And I thought, gee, this guy looks well. And so, of course, with YouTube, more and more of these carnivore videos came up in the feed. And I'd never heard of carnivore. I didn't even know what carnivore was. In fact, I didn't even know what keto was, really. I'm probably like a lot of people in the world who just don't know. I'm an engineer by training. My whole life has been in the technical world until I started farming. And you would follow. I never followed a diet. I just ate food, and so all these. I think on YouTube they'd call them influencers, but I call them educators. So people, I've got the whole list here. Professor Bart Kay, Dr. Paul Mason, Gary Fettke. It goes on. Tim Noakes. I actually knew of Tim Noakes back in 1984 in Cape Town when I was at university there. He's made a name for himself already as an athlete, as a distance, I think a middle distance, long distance runner. and as a nutritionist. And so I was looking at all of these things, and it was really making sense to me. But really, what got to me is when it came to the political and religious side. When I learnt about this Ellen G. White and her having visions, and Harvey Kellogg, and all of that, and then Nina Teicholz with her videos and her talks, and that really got me going. I was thinking, what the hell is this, and the only book I've bought on Carnivore is Nina Teicholz's book, The Big Fat Surprise. And just reading that, and almost the fraud in the studies. I suppose it is fraud, people like Ansel Keys. I mean, it's just amazing. And how the industry has captured the institutions and so on and so forth. So it got to April, and I thought, okay, I'm going to try it. What have I got to lose? I can easily I can go back in one day, going back to broccoli and beans and whatever. So I said, tomorrow I'm going to start. And it just coincidentally happened tomorrow was the 25th of April, which is Anzac Day in Australia. And for people that don't know, Anzac is really quite a sacred day here, where we commemorate our fallen and all the soldiers that have fought in the various theatres of war around the world. So went to the shops, and I think my transition was probably not that good. I bought myself a few cans of sauerkraut and a couple of slabs of dark chocolate, and that was it. In the supermarket, I couldn't find the sauerkraut. It was right down at the bottom of the shelf, sort of tucked away somewhere. But I did find him. And so my transition then was just to go to meat and dairy and the sauerkraut for a few weeks and the chocolate. And then things started happening. The reflux, the acid, gone in a day. I mean, the next day I never had it again, ever. Nothing, So that's a big plus. Just like that, nothing. Okay. My weight started coming off just about immediately. So at the time, now I've never been a big guy. I'm 5'8", not a big guy. My mom was a very slightly built woman. I've kind of got that kind of structure, but I was up. And excuse me, I'm sorry to people that have been really heavy. My maximum weight ever was 77 kilos, 170 pounds. Okay. But it was all around my belly. It was around my belly. My belt was holding up my pants around my belly, not my hips. And I got in the scales every day, and the weight started coming off. It's coming off. And at one point, suddenly my belt was on my hips, and I thought, wow, this is what it's like to feel like a man. Suddenly I was like a young man again. Yeah. And so the weight kept coming off, and it was coming down rapidly, and I was getting a little bit kind of concerned because I crashed through 70 kilos and it just kept going. I'm now down at about 63.5 kilos, which is what I weighed when I was 17. So I'm now like 135, 140 pounds. So I've lost 30 kilos. And then I thought, just imagine you pick up 30 kilos and carry 30 kilos around wherever you go. Sorry, not 30 kilos, 30 pounds wherever you go. And then I'm thinking people that have lost 150 pounds and more, just how amazing they must feel. Yeah. So that's the weight loss, and it's now sort of bottomed out, and it's just basically steady. I don't even weigh myself anymore. I just look at the mirror and I say, "Hey, you're chiseled, man." I can see my muscle definition, and it's just incredible. Then I woke up one morning, and I'm lying there, and I'm thinking, this is different. I'm breathing through my nose. I'm breathing through my nose, and it's clear as a bell. Yeah. And up until that point, for years, I'd had stuffy nose, snotty nose, blowing my nose a lot, breathing through my mouth. With the result, you get dry mouth. and so on. And suddenly I'm breathing through my nose, and it's just feels amazing. And it's been like that ever since. And this was very early on, maybe in 4 weeks into it. And then allied with your nose is your ears. So also I was having a lot of trouble with my ears, a lot of blocked ears, a lot of dirty brown wax in my ears, using ear drops to dissolve the wax and so on. I was going through earbuds left, right, and center, and my ears just cleared up as well. And flying in an aeroplane, if I, coming into land with the pressurization and so on, it was before it was very, very painful. Now, coming to land, it's just a little gentle pop and away you go. What a pleasure. Okay, so that was the ears, and then I noticed my skin becoming very kind of like a silky feeling to my skin, and prior to that, I was getting a lot of pimples along my forehead, and I thought, being on a farm, you always wear a hat, and you kind of, as you walk out the door, your hand goes out and grabs the head. It's like putting seatbelts on in your car. You don't even know you've done it. You've put your hat on. And I was thinking it was the rim of my hat and the sweat on the rim that was causing that. And I would wash my hat, and I'd keep getting these sort of quite painful pimples. And I used to get these pimples on my chin as well, pimples on the side of my nose. Um, those have all gone. And as an experiment, I'd heard about sunburn. And I think Lee Coppice on his channel talks about it as well, because he's a window cleaner. He's out in the open, and I'm sure in the UK they don't get as intense sun as we do get here out in the back blocks of New South Wales. And I did an experiment. Being on the farm, my feet hadn't seen sun, I don't think, for forever. And I got a real farmer's tan. You got brown legs, and then at your sock level, there's an absolutely clear line, and then white as snow below. So I've got a ride on mower. So I thought, okay, I'm going to just do an experiment with myself here. I'm going out in the run. I'm going to mow the lawn, take my socks off. I just put a pair of thongs on and drove the mower around, probably half an hour, 45 minutes in the sun. Didn't feel a thing. Feet just went to a brown color. That's it. And then I did another experiment. Took my shirt off one day mowing, and mowed out in the sun. Same thing. Just
That's
kind of
awesome.
went to a tan. Yeah. And this summer, I've stopped using sunscreen altogether. And I used to always put sunscreen on, because we were told, in Australia there was this old thing, slip, slop, slap, slap on some sunscreen, slop on some, I don't know how it went, but I used to have these big 1 liter containers of sunscreen. Haven't used sunscreen the whole summer. Never had any chapped lips. Skin moist, beautiful. Just absolutely amazing. And so those sort of n equals 1 experiments has proved it to me. And also listening to a lot of the podcasts, you hear about these sunscreens. What chemicals have they got in them that are getting into your skin that are actually harmful? So there's
Right. I mean, the scary thing when you think about it is, like, you're sold the idea that the sun is the thing that gives you skin cancer, and you think, well, is it wholly the sun's fault here, or is it more to do with all the chemicals we're slathering on our body constantly?
yeah, the chemicals we're slathering on our body, and what we're taking in as carbohydrates. I kind of look at it as with the carbohydrates and the sugar and everything, is that you're slowly caramelizing. You kind of to use a sort of a simplistic look at it. But then again, when Dr. Anthony Chaffee, he goes through the sort of historic, pre-civilization, our ancestors going back millions of years, they ran around in the sun. And if it was that bad, they wouldn't have survived. They would have all died of cancer because they didn't have sunblock and hats and whatever. They just did it, you know. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
there was no slip, slop, slap back in,
No,
back whenever,
no,
right?
definitely not. Definitely not. And then also in explorations, you can't help but come across Sally Norton uh, and what she talks about. And at one point, the skin on my legs went kind of this milky sort of color, like as if they were flaking. And I think that was oxalate dumping. And yeah, but that went away. Um, the other thing that improved was my eyes. Whenever I went out in the sun, my eyes would absolutely burn, and I'd have to put sunglasses on. Now I can go out in the sun where I prefer to wear the sunglasses, but it's manageable. You know, it's fine. And also driving at night, the reflectors, because you've got a lot of reflectors on the road, um, and those bright pinpoints of light, my eyes would absolutely burn. And you can't wear sunglasses while you're driving at night, so that was really painful. That's that's all gone. Um, and then just general aches and pains. I always used to get a toothache, back tooth. Go to the dentist, they do an X-ray, um, can't find anything, and I'd get these toothaches for a few days. It would really ache, and then it would just go away, and it'd come back again, and it would go away. Dentist could never find anything. When I was a young fellow, I used to play rugby as well, and injured my left knee. Never ever had an operation on it, but through the years, periodically it would ache. Since I've gone onto the carnivore, not a problem. And being on a farm, you jump off the tractor on the quad bike, off the quad bike through gates. The ground's not level. You often kind of twist your legs and so on. Um, Never any problem with my knee. Also, arthritis. Um, the best way I can explain it, if I was driving in the car and you just got your hands resting on the wheel and your hands in this sort of one position for a long time, to straighten my fingers was absolutely painful. Now I have just beautiful flexibility. I used to play the guitar a lot, not much anymore, but the reason I stopped because I couldn't form a chord on the guitar with my left hand. Now I can form chords and I can actually move my hands on the fretboard. It's amazing. Um, and then the other thing that I've experienced is the sugar spikes and crashes. My whole life it was plagued with um, falling asleep after a meal, and it was really embarrassing. I'd go to people, have a meal, lovely meal, and then sit down after dinner, and then basically just can't keep awake. Just absolutely crash. Um, and while that's embarrassing, what's worse is driving, because I often drive back and forth to Sydney, and what I used to do is stop. It's a 3-hour trip. 1 hour out, I'd time it so it would be lunchtime. I'd stop and have a hamburger, and then 40 minutes later, driving on the freeway, I'm starting to fall asleep and trying to stay awake behind the wheel, and it's actually scary. You switch the music up loud, you open the windows, and it just does not help. You're starting to fall asleep. That's all gone. I can drive now to Sydney 3 hours straight and not even feel it. That's just amazing. So all of those improvements from a guy who was healthy, all of these little things were things that my body was screaming at me, hey, there's something wrong here, and you kind of ignore them. Yeah. I think that's with a lot of people, and especially men. We have little ailments and we ignore them and we just go, oh, yeah, tough it out. Um, and and my body was really really talking to me, and I think I caught myself just in time. Um, so just moving on then. So I started, and all of these things were happening. And then in August, my birthday is in August. I'm a Leo, so maybe I should be a carnivore. Um, so in August, I go for my annual, let's call it a checkup, but it's really just to get my blood test done. So I go to the doctor, get the orders for the various pathology departments, go and get my blood test, come home, and now the doctor's an hour's drive away from me. So yeah, come home, get the test done. Next thing, I get a call from the rooms. Oh, doctor wants to see you urgently. So, I think, wow, this is bad. And since I was 50, since I was 50 years old, I've had a blood test every year, and my cholesterol has been just on the simplistic looking at cholesterol, just the levels, has been okay. Maybe a bit high on the LDL, but the doctors never had sort of any never any concern. Maybe not because they weren't looking at the ratios or anything like that. Anyway, I go back to the doc, and he says, I've never seen anyone with an LDL this high. And my LDL has shot up to, I think it's like 300 in the American system, micrograms per liter, or whatever it is. Really high. And immediately wants to put me on a statin. And I politely said to him, I said, I'm not inclined to take any statins. I will not take a statin. And I think he was quite taken aback by it. But then I said to him, I said, well, how do I know that these tests are correct? Because I've worked in manufacturing, engineering, product design, development, project management all my life. And I know that instruments go out of whack, and you have to have instruments calibrated, and there's operator error and all sorts of things. And why shouldn't there be in a pathology lab some kind of an error? So he agreed with me, to his credit. He said, okay, we'll get you another test. And then I said, look, I've learned on the internet that there's the subfractions of LDL. I think from Dr. Paul Mason, he does a very good explanation of the LDL, and he's got a little model about how you can assess from your cholesterol readings, the ratios, and when you become a pattern B, and you need further investigation. So yeah, my LDL's way high, but I actually wasn't concerned, because I looked at my LDL, so HDL to triglyceride ratio, and it was fine. And so he ordered another test. So 2 weeks later, I went for another test. In the meantime, I'd come back after that first notification about my high LDL, and went back on YouTube, and I found Dave Feldman and Nick Norwitz about lean mass hyperresponder, and looked at this and looked at their data and the correlation between people with high LDL and CAC scores. And I said, yeah, that's me. Skinny little bloke with a high LDL. So yeah, that's me. And in the meantime, I'm feeling better than I have just about all my life. No more headaches. I used to get migraines when I was in my 20s and 30s. No more of those days where you just feel foggy. You're just kind of under the weather. So I looked at this, the work from David Feldman and Nick Norwitz, and I thought, yeah, I'm not going to worry. I'm not going to worry too much. Had the retest of my bloods, and had the subfractions done, and then went back to the doctor. And lo and behold, the LDL, I've got one extra spike there. So I've got a bit of LDL that's not good. So again, I said, look, I'm not going to take a statin. And then he said, well, then I think you should need to go and see a cardiologist. So I said, okay, I'll go and see a cardiologist. He was going to recommend me a cardiologist in this area. And I said, thanks, I think I'll find a cardiologist myself in Sydney. Came back home, and I scratched my head, and I thought, well, how am I going to find a cardiologist? And what if the cardiologist is a statin guy? I'm just basically at square one. And then I thought, and I'd also come back and done that little model from Dr. Paul Mason, and found that I was pattern B, need further investigation. So I go, what am I going to do now? So I go, I know Dr. Mason's in Sydney, so I looked him up, phoned his secretary, and I asked her, I said, do you know of a cardiologist that's in the carnivore space? And she said, no, we don't, and we wouldn't give that recommendation anyway. But she said, I do have an appointment with Dr. Mason on the 31st, I think it was the 31st of October. That's 31st of October, 24. And I put down the phone, said, no thanks, put down the phone, thought for 5 minutes, and then I thought, yep, I'm going to take that appointment with Dr. Mason. Went to see Dr. Mason with my tests and everything, and he does the first interview is a 45-minute session. And two things I immediately noticed about him. First of all, you book your appointment, he sees you exactly on time. Exactly on time. He comes out, going to his office. No small talk, no nonsense, straight into it. And he goes through thoroughly everything. He asks you questions. And I also had 10 questions that I wanted to ask him, various things about diet and so on. And one of them was about soap, because I have a concern that the soaps that we use are basically petroleum based, made of, I don't know what they're made of, and so on. So he said to me, tallow soap. And I had rendered in my little carnivore journey to that point, I had started rendering my own tallow. And I can go into a story because I'm also a regenerative farmer, and if we've got time to talk about that, I eat my own meat off the farm, and I kill the calves fairly young, so they don't have a lot of fat on them. So I had to supplement fat with tallow. So I had tallow, and he said, "Yeah, tallow soap." And of course, then he went through the whole thing. And another thing that struck me about him, the first thing he does is he invites you to record the interview. So completely open and transparent, completely open. And the other thing, he didn't do a blood pressure test on me. He didn't, the first thing you go into a doctor, you've got an ailment. First thing I do is whack on the blood pressure and, take your blood pressure. And then never talk about it again in the whole consultation. And he goes through very, 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 very thoroughly. And he said to me, look, this LDL it's not the disease. It's a symptom. The disease is caused by something else. So we're going to try and find out what it is. And he then gave me this battery of tests. And in the meantime, he's typing all this, and you get home and there's this whole list of emails from Dr. Mason. There's papers that he's written. There's references to YouTube. There's the scripts for the pathology departments and everything that you need to do. And then I followed that. Went and had the tests, and the blood tests were just unbelievable. Go into the pathology, and the nurse there, she's going on, and she's pulling out all these vials, and she's writing and writing and writing. It's taking like forever. And then she says, I think you better lie down because I'm going to take a lot of blood. And she takes all the tests. And I then went back to Dr. Mason in February, and his second consultation is 25 minutes. Exactly the 25 minutes. Start on time, finish on time, and that's where I'm at with him. And I don't think he's that perturbed because he said, "Look, don't bother calling us. We'll call you in about 3 or 4 months." And there are going to be some tests. In the meantime, take these supplements. And he gave me a few supplements to take, one of which is iodine. And I've since learnt about iodine. I think I think Leah Keith or Margaret is big on iodine, and listen to that. And the beef that we have here on the kind of hinterland has no iodine in it, and I'm eating pretty much totally my own beef and my own eggs. So iodine's a problem. I think at the coast, the beef cattle would have a bit more iodine in them from the influence of the coast, but pretty close to the coast. So I do take an iodine supplement. Also, I had some soil tests done on my soils on my farm some years ago, and I mentioned to Dr. Mason, I said maybe there's lacking in some of these minerals or these elements in the soil. And he said, yeah, go and have a look. And I went back, and in my tests, I'm low on boron and low on selenium, um, on those blood tests that came through. And I came back and found that in my soils are low on boron and selenium. In fact, the soils here are quite depleted, and the soil here is classified as a clay loam soil, and they give you sort of a scale of all the minerals and what the upper and lower limits are of that type of soil. And just about everything is on this farm is at the low end. So I'm also taking a boron supplement and a selenium supplement for the time being, and we'll see how that transpires. So I think the takeaway from that is, if you do a carnivore diet, um, is to get a variety of meats and fish, um, so that you're not stuck with one. But I'm pretty much stuck with what I've got. So in my diet now, I do eat a tin of sardines every day. I also make beef broth. Love the beef broth. Um, and yeah, that's what it's at. And just to go through where I went, my transition in the carnivore diet. At first, I continued with dairy. So I was eating yogurt, butter, cheese. And prior to starting carnivore, I had this thing where I'd wake up in the middle of the night with a crashing headache. Um, it happened night after night after night. I wake up with this headache. And I was always thinking, well, I'm dehydrated, and I'd go and drink some water, and it would make it a little bit better, and then go back to bed. And after I started carnivore, and since I've started carnivore, I've had no green vegetables, nothing. And I can talk about vegetables because I've never ever liked eating veggies, never. Um, so then I was looking at the cheeses I was eating, and I used to buy this. I call it block cheese from the supermarket. It comes in a block. It's probably about a kilo, half a kilo. It's a big block of cheddar. It's hard. I used to daily eat a slice of that, and I stopped that cheese, and the headaches kind of went away. Um, and then through the test that Dr. Mason had given me, he one of the tests, of the battery of tests, was a food allergy test, and it sort of came up is that I'm lactose intolerant, and I've had milk and cheese and that all my life. And while not heavily lactose or dairy intolerant, a bit dairy intolerant, and he said to me, he said, yeah, quit the dairy. So now I don't have any cheese. I'll eat cheese occasionally, and really just the soft cheeses like the bries and the camemberts, and those headaches have gone. If I wake up in the night, no headache, gone. Yeah, amazing, amazing. So different people will be affected. And in terms of diet now, my diet is pretty much full on carnivore. I have 5 eggs and 2 big rashers of bacon. My butcher makes the most beautiful smoked bacon. So 5 eggs and 2 rashers of bacon. I do the bacon in the air fryer quite gently, and I just scramble the eggs in the pan. Also cook them very gently so that they come up nicely, with salt. And when I first started eating those eggs, in the morning, it was amazing because I could last for 6, 7, 8 hours without feeling hungry. Amazing, amazing. And prior to that, my breakfast would be, I was eating eggs. I would put herbs in my eggs because I got herbs in the garden. I'd have a couple of slices of toast. I'd have oats. I'd put some berries in the oats, maple syrup on the oats, milk on the oats, and that was breakfast. And by morning tea, I'd come in and eat half a packet of biscuits, and then have a couple of slices of my homemade bread at lunch with something on it. And then dinners, pretty much pasta a lot of the time. And so I've gone off the dairy, and now my diet is the eggs and bacon for breakfast. For lunch, if you call it that, I'd have the tin of sardines, and if I've got beef broth, I don't make it all the time, but I'll have the beef broth. And then about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll have 500 grams of steak or 500 grams of mince, ground beef. Um, Again, I cook it. I cook the steaks and the ground beef very gently. I don't fry the steak in a pan. I do it in the air fryer at a low temperature, and you can get a very beautiful, nice pink through the steak, almost to. I like it kind of a medium rare, and it's just lovely. And initially, when I was losing that weight, I couldn't get 300 grams of steak into me, because my body was. I think my body was consuming. It was burning the fat. So it was saying, oh, you got enough, you got enough. And Anthony Chaffee talks about it, how your body and your taste will tell you that you've had enough. But now I've kind of settled out to 500 grams of steak. I've never ever measured calories. I've never seen the sense in it my whole life. How am I going to measure calories? Um, so I just go by weight now, and it's kind of settled out to about 800 to 900 grams of food a day.
How is your energy now compared to like when you're on a regular diet? Because I mean, you've got quite a physical job, right?
Oh, energy is fantastic. Amazing. First of all, you're not carrying that weight around dragging you down. And I wasn't carrying that much weight, I suppose. Um, but just the whole energy. I'll just take yesterday, for example. Um, I had to do a delivery into Sydney on Saturday, stayed overnight at my house in Sydney, got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, left, got back here at 8 o'clock. Now, I hadn't had breakfast. I had a cup of coffee, and I still drink coffee, by the way. Most people can't give up the coffee. Um, uh, had a cup of coffee on the way, and my plan was I had to reorganize my cattle. I had to pull the bull off the herd, and that 8 o'clock. So we had just gone on to daylight saving yesterday, off daylight saving. Back here at 8 o'clock, 10:30, I finished with the cattle. So I'd been up to the top of the farm a couple of times, moved the cattle around, sorted the cattle in the yards, moved the cattle back across the bull and a few cows that the bull could still stay with across, because it's useful keeping the bull with some cows. It's easier to move him. He'll follow the cows. So that was 2.5 hours. Came in and had my breakfast, my eggs, which I just love. I have the same thing every single day, and I look forward to it every day. After that, cleaned out the eskies, did a few other things, came in, had my sardines, and then I was feeling a little bit tired, had a bit of a lie down, got up, and I've got a program of planting trees on my farm. Later in the afternoon, went and planted 10 trees, which took 12 trees, which took me a couple of hours. Finished at nightfall, came back, and then had my dinner, which I normally have at 3 o'clock. I had probably at 5:30, 6 o'clock last night. The amazing thing about the carnivore diet and eating the eggs and the meat, and you learn this from Lee Koppes. I mean, I really feel for the guy. He's gone through, to hell and back, and to have the demeanor that he has is to me just amazing. And he speaks so eloquently, um, uh, and to learn from him about what he sees in his bag, and when he has vegetables that they just come out virtually, uh, undigested, and that your stomach digests the meat to the fluid completely. It's just amazing. You never feel full. You never feel bloated. One of the problems I suppose I had initially was, in my whole life I can count on my one hand how many times I've had diarrhea, and that was probably because of food poisoning. Um, but I've always tended towards constipation, and in my first sort of 6 months of carnivore, um, I think I was a bit constipated, and I was keeping on looking it up, and people were saying it's not that much of a problem and so on. But I did take a few laxatives to try and ease it. But now it's absolutely normal. You go to the loo once every 2 or 3 days, and you never have that excruciating pressure. You might be out somewhere, and so when you're on the carb diet, and suddenly your body just says you've got to go, and you've got this really absolute, and you're somewhere, and you think, well, I can't. There's nowhere I can go, and you don't want to go to some disgusting public toilet. So you hold it in, and it's painful. And then when you eventually do get to the toilet, it doesn't want to come. You sort of like, now it's just a gentle nudge from your body, and if you can't get there, it's okay. You just wait and go when you have to, when you can. It's just amazing. So yeah, so my diet now is very, 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 very simple. Very go to the soup, and what am I going to buy? Sardines. That's my shopping list.
Well,
And then
and that's the thing as well. So basically, you're only buying bacon and sardines. Everything else you're growing yourself.
yeah. So the chickens, I've got some chickens, and these little birds give me these beautiful gifts every morning, and I eat those beautiful thick yolks and egg whites, um, and they just day after day they give me each of them give me an egg. Just a fantastic thing. One of the problems I've found with carnivore is when you travel and you're on the road. Um, uh, so last October, before I saw Dr. Mason, I went to South Africa for a 40-year reunion, a university reunion, and so I go onto the Qantas website, look at the special meals. Of course, there's no carnivore option, is there? I knew there wouldn't be. You're dreaming if you're going to see a carnivore option. So I go, well, I've got a 14-hour flight. What am I going to do? So I made myself a steak, cooked myself a steak, and a dozen hard-boiled eggs, and ate the steak while I was at the airport waiting for the plane. And then every 4 hours on the plane, I ate four eggs, four of my hard-boiled. So there I am in my seat, grab this. Grab the eggs out and start breaking eggs, peeling the eggs, and eating the eggs. I don't know what the person next to me was thinking, but
And sorry, this was on an international flight. They let you take
yeah,
it on an
yeah,
international.
I've done that a couple of times now. and
Wow.
then coming back from South Africa, right? So now I'm going. Well, I stayed with some friends, and I said, "Look, can I boil up some eggs?" They said, "Yeah, boil some eggs." Um, and while I was in South Africa, I don't know if you know, in South Africa they have biltong, which is the dried meat, and they have also what they call dry vorse. Boerewors is farmer's sausage, basically made out of beef and pork. I was with my sister, and we did a bit of a tour, and I'm just eating. They dry the sausage as well, and I just love that. It's so easy to eat. You just bite it off, and I'm eating this stuff, and then I'm coming back to Australia. So I've got the eggs, and I say to my friend, we just got to go down to the butchers and get some Druivors. And I bought, I think, 300 or 400 grams of this stuff, and the whole flight over, I'm just eating this stuff. um, and the eggs. And another thing about travel and talking about temptation, I think one of the difficulties that people find, and I certainly found it, is the temptation that's in front of you. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You see people talk about, you see all these guys, I call them educators, not influencers, educators, um, talking about the middle aisles of the supermarket. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you look at the supermarkets and you go, oh my God, look at all this stuff. And people are buying it, loading up their trolleys with it. You go to fill up with fuel, go pay for your fuel. Um, and at the kiosk, the whole place is just surrounded with sugar, lollies everywhere. There's nothing in that whole shop that is of nutritional value at all. The only thing that's possibly any good for you is the bottled water that you can get in the fridge. There's a pie oven with pies in. The pies have hardly got any meat in, probably cooked in seed oils, um, with a pastry. Not very good for you at all. And when I look in there, when I go in there, I just look at it and I say, well, this is just, this is just slow release poison. And back in the day, I would always go and pay for my fuel, and there'd be, they'd have special $2 for a Kit Kat. I'd buy a Kit Kat and have the Kit Kat, and um,
The worst of
yeah.
all this is most people are blind to it, right?
Well, absolutely. I was totally blind to it. I was absolutely blind to it. People go about their lives. You're not thinking about all you see about diet is what you see on the news and on the television. Um, and then they say, oh, there's a study that says eating meat may cause cancer. So that scares the living daylights out of you. So you don't eat meat. And if I go back right through, one of the things about carnivore that I really started thinking about, I thought you start thinking about your whole life. And now at 68 years old, um, I'm thinking about my whole life and what I've eaten through my life. And going back to being in South Africa, we were conscripted into the army when we were young guys. I was 17 when I was conscripted into the army, and I remember that was 1974. And when I first arrived in the army, they used to give us salt tablets. We used to take salt tablets. Then suddenly, in that year, they came to us and said no more salt tablets because they were told that salt was bad for you. And since that time, I've never salted my food. Nothing. Never ever put salt on my food. Only the salt I would get which would be naturally occurring. So 1974 till now, it's at 50 years. I haven't put salt in my food. Never, ever. Okay. Also, I remember back in the 60s when I went to boarding school, and back in the 60s they used to, at recess in the mornings, they'd give us bread and margarine and jam. And the margarine at that time was this white, really terrible white margarine. And sort of very early in the 70s, they changed. We started getting the yellow butter-like margarine in. And my mom transitioned to basically to margarine. And so for many, 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 many years, I ate margarine. And only recently I heard, probably maybe 5, 6, I don't know, 10 years, you lose track of time, that butter wasn't bad for you. So I started eating butter again. Um, so your whole life, you've been eating margarine, which they tell me is like one molecule of being plastic. No salt. Um, Also, lean meats. I never ever stopped eating meat. I was never going to do a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet. To me, that just sounded horrible. I've not liked vegetables. I've never been able to eat a tomato. Um, Even my mom, she used to try and give me a tomato. I said, no, I can't eat that. Can't eat a tomato. I have had tomatoes in salads and so on, or cooked into sauces, into bolognese sauces and so on. That's okay. But to bite into tomato, I just can't do it. Just can't do it. Um, and then
I had
vegetables.
the same feeling as a kid.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. It was just that when you bite into it and that explosion of the middle, it was
Oh,
just too much for me.
ooh. And yet a lot of people love tomatoes. Love tomatoes. And now the tomatoes you buy in the supermarkets are like bits of rubber. They're green. They might look okay, but they're hard. All vegetables are hard, and if you compare meat with vegetables, this meat is this lovely soft material. Vegetables are hard: broccoli, kale, green beans, potatoes, sweet potatoes, the whole lot of them. They're hard things. You have to cook them to soften them up to make them even edible. So my diet up until becoming carnivore, I used to make my own bolognese sauce. Um, and typically my bolognese sauce, I thought I made a really nice bolognese. I like my bolognese sauce. Lean mince, 500 grams of mince, a couple of cans of diced tomatoes. I'd throw in soybean sauce, some Worcester sauce, sugar. Uh, I put in a few stock cubes and mushrooms and capsicum and carrots. Make a really nice sauce, cook it up, and that would last me 5 meals. That brew would last me 5 meals. So, of those 5 meals, I was getting each day basically 100 grams of protein from the mince, and a couple of eggs that I had for breakfast in the morning, and maybe some dairy through the day. And so with the pasta, so I'd cook the pasta, and there the pasta is just basically, high processed carbohydrate. Yeah. Um, with the pasta, I would think, no, I've got to have some green vegetables because I've been told green vegetables are good for you. So I'd always steam the vegetables. I'd have carrots. I'd have broccoli, beans, green beans. Never liked green beans. So my plate would have the pasta, the bolognese sauce on top, and the veggies on the side there. Probably about half and half in terms of area covered on the plate. And I would douse the vegetables in Worcester sauce because that's the only way I could get them down. Yeah. And thinking about eating salads as well, the only way I could eat a salad is if I'd had salad dressing on it. If it's doctored with a salad dressing, and the salad dressings are usually seed oils anyway. So,
And so
um,
the like salad, like vegetables and salads and all that kind of stuff, it's almost just like a vehicle for dressing or a vehicle for bacon wrapped around it or something like that, right?
yeah, yeah. And then people put raw broccoli into salad, chop up small bits of raw broccoli or raw capsicum or something like that in it, onions. Um, stopped all that. Stopped that. Gone. Never had it again. Never had it again.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, traveling is a problem. One of the temptations was when I first got on a plane after starting Carnivore. I just had a short flight up to Brisbane. In Newcastle Airport, walk in there. Got about an hour to wait for the plane. Um, go and get a coffee, and very nice kiosk with the display of all the wraps and the sandwiches and so on. Now, normally I would have gone in there and bought myself a wrap and had that with my coffee. And I looked at it and I said, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And then I said, no, 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 no. And I was only kind of like a few weeks into starting Carnivore. And yes, the temptations are there. It's everywhere. It's so easy just to say, oh yeah, I'll just have one. And I've been able to say to myself, I'm in for this. I'm in full time, and I don't regret it. And I think if you see that sort of thing, just turn away, just turn around and walk away. You can do it mentally or you can do it physically, and just turn around and walk away.
So, Peter, if one of your friends came to you and said, I want to start this carnivore diet, tell me what to do, what advice would you give them to maximize their chances of success?
Okay, I'd say look at a few videos on YouTube. I'd give them you. I'd say look, you can find videos there if you've got an ailment of any kind. You'll find a video of somebody who's suffered that. You know, um, and then I've got a whole long list here. Sean Baker, Eric Westman, Anthony Chaffee, Professor Bart Kay. I reckon Bart Kay is fantastic. I just love his directness. Ken Carnivore, Paul Mason, Gary Fettke, Tim Noakes. Those two guys are just heroes to me. What real men. So armed with information, you can start to make a decision. Okay. In actually starting, I probably started the wrong way. I kind of went into it too hard. Um, I would say, right, just start with breakfast. Just start with breakfast. Instead of having your oats and your berries and whatever else, just start with eggs and bacon. And you will find very quickly that you don't need anything through the morning, and you'll go through lunch without even being hungry at lunchtime. That'll be your kind of initial. have what you had at lunch and have what you have at dinner, and just do that, and you'll find. I found that, and then kind of take it from there. But you've got to go in it. Um, you've got to give yourself a time frame. People say at least 30 days. I would say 90. I think after 6 months, my body was still transitioning. I was still um, going through the transition. But yeah, do it a little bit gradually. Um, Change your shopping habits, and you find it starts your life starts to become so simple. Cooking becomes not an issue.
Mm.
I think
I
you
like
know.
this approach. I really like that approach, of just substituting breakfast first, because it's actually teaching you a lesson passively, because
Mm,
you're going to eat that, as you say, and then not feel hungry, and so that morning snack that you would normally have, you're not going to feel like it, and potentially you get through lunch without even wanting to eat, or without
yeah,
you at least get to lunchtime without feeling like I need to have lunch soon.
yeah,
So it's a good lesson to introduce you to a new way of eating.
yeah. But also is to look up all those sites on YouTube. And YouTube's amazing. I don't know why they have to censor people, so on. Lighten up, YouTube. Lighten up. There's a whole world of different thought and good thought, and good ideas, that we can all learn from. And these guys, what I like about all of the guys and all of the people. Zoe Harcum, I think she's fantastic. Nina Teicholz, Sally Norton. They're all absolutely, they're not in your face. It's when I see somebody and they're shouting at you, and um, and they're coming on really strong, I just tune out. But all of them, very good arguments, very well researched, good experience, um, and your channel, I think, is really amazing. I think with all the interviews that you've done, you've built up a body of knowledge, and I think a study of real life experiences of real people who have suffered because of the carbohydrate, seed oil, the whole thing we've been through. And not only is it a body of knowledge, but it's a body of evidence. Because I know that the food companies know, the information is out there now. The food companies know. And making foods that are, that hit your pleasure points, it's deliberate. It's not. It's there to sell products, and people are still using these products. I mean, I look around. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I look at people, and I see people limping, people not walking, and they're shuffling, and they're not that old. They're overweight. I see people with these pressure bandages on their legs. It's very, very sad. And especially as you're getting older, when you get to my age, you're starting to say, well, there is an end now. And really, what I'm aiming to be is as healthy as I possibly can, and then just not waking up one day, whenever that may be, and not being a burden to anybody, not being a burden to the health system. And from my point of view, Carnivore has given that to me. It is just such a release. It's just wonderful. It's amazing, amazing,
Mm.
really amazing.
So,
Yeah.
Peter, is there a way that people can reach out to you? Do you have any social media or any other way of getting in contact?
No, I don't. I can leave you an email, but really, I don't think there's much more that I can say. I'm just a practitioner of carnivore. There's not much more than I can say than what I've said, other than to give people some reassurance, I guess. But just take reassurance from me now. If it's not working for you, go back to eating carbohydrates. Find out. Do a 90-day trial, but do it properly. Don't go and suddenly say, well, yeah, I'll just sneak in the odd chocolate bar every day or a Coke or whatever, because you'll just defeat it just like that. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your experience. I really appreciate your time, Peter.
Well, thank you, Dave, for all you do and for all the other educators for all they've done. I mean, they've given me their information for nothing. And really, if you save one person, it's worth it. And I think Carnivore is going to save many, 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 many people.
Mm.
Just got to wake up to it. That's all.